What's going on, everyone? It is our very first pay-per-view of 2024 where Sean Strickland will be going up against Dricus Du Plessis, UFC 297. That'll happen in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And tonight we are going to break down all the action for this card from top to bottom. My name is Tyler Little. You're watching Mom's Basement MMA. If you're brand new here, I'd really appreciate it if you guys would stick around and subscribe. It would really help me boost the algorithm and push this video out to a bunch of other people. That's the name of the game, trying to grow, trying to do this the right way. So any help that you guys can provide, I'd be really appreciative. Let's get right into this, though. We got a lot of action, and let's just start with the very first fight. And it'll happen in the flyweight division when Jasdivicious goes up against Priscilla Cachoeira. The Canadian, the minus 350 favorite, going up against Cachoeira, Zombie Girl, plus 275. For most of the intangibles for this fight, the age, the height, the reach, it's mostly a push. There's a slight reach advantage for Cachoeira, but there's really not a whole lot here that'll leap out at the paper when you study both of these women. Last year was pretty solid for Jasmine. She did pick up a win over Gabby Fernandez. She also had a solid win over Miranda Maverick. I thought that was very, very impressive. The only blemish for Jasmine is, of course, she did end up dropping her last bout against Tracy Cortez by decision. For Cachoeira, she comes into this fight. She did lose to Miranda Maverick by submission. Priscilla Cachoeira, pretty straightforward. I mean, she's mostly a brawler. 7 of her 12 wins have come by knockout. In the UFC, some of her notable wins, she has knockout victories over Ariane Lipinski, Gina Mazzani, and Shayna Dobson as well. But when I look at this matchup, I think it's pretty straightforward. Jasdivicious, minus 350. Really not a whole lot of betting value here. This might be a fight to avoid, but I do think Jasmine's the right pick. She is going to have a significant grappling advantage over Priscilla Cachoeira. I think as long as she doesn't get sucked into a brawl, she should figure out a way to get the victory over the Brazilian. And let's be honest, the UFC, this fight's in Ontario. Jasmine trains at Niagara Top Team. That is an hour away from Toronto. So listen, the UFC knows what they're doing. This is a setup fight. The idea here is for Jasmine Jasdivicious to get in the win column and get this crowd kind of buzzing. And I think she's going to get it done. Wouldn't surprise me if Jasmine figured out a way to submit Cachoeira, but I'm just going to say Jasmine Jasdivicious by decision. May not make a whole lot of sense to bet this one. This may be a parlay opportunity, but in any event, I think Jasmine Jasdivicious is the right pick. And that's who we'll be going with in the very first fight of the night. For the second fight, we stay at 125 pounds, but instead we go to the men's flyweight division where Malcolm Gordon will be going up against Jimmy Flick. At the time of this recording, the odds have these guys as a pick'em, so minus 115 apiece. And looking at the intangibles for both men, again, this fight is mostly a wash. Same age, same height. There is a slight 2-inch reach advantage for Malcolm X. As far as what this bout means for both men, it's of the highest importance. Both these guys are on a 2-bout winning streak, and the loser of this bout is likely going to get their pink slip and get fired from the UFC. So this is a real must-win situation for both Flick and Gordon, respectively. I'm going to start with the American Jimmy Flick. We all know kind of what Jimmy Flick's about. The submissions are what you have to watch out for. He's a bit of a one-trick pony. That is how he has made it to this level of mixed martial arts. He's able to grapple. He's able to apply his jiu-jitsu and get those submission finishes. Really, outside of that, though, there's not a whole lot there. All of his defeats in MMA have come by knockout. That is very, very alarming, but it's definitely something that's worth bringing up. When Jimmy Flick loses, he loses by knockout. So his chin is really non-existent. For Gordon, the results really haven't been there either as of late. He's on a 2-4 stretch, but it's really important to know that Malcolm Gordon has been going up against the absolute top competition. He lost against Jake Hadley. He got finished against Mokaev. He got finished against Amir Albazi and Sumadraji as well. So all of that stuff is really important to take into account. Malcolm has had really, really difficult fights. But fighting Jimmy Flick, I mean, quite honestly, this is probably the easiest fight for Malcolm Gordon in this case. And the UFC, again, they know what they're doing. They want Jasdivicious to get a win, and they want Malcolm Gordon to get a win. And that's exactly what's going to happen on fight night. I'm going to go with Malcolm Gordon by knockout. That's how Jimmy Flick ends up losing. It has less to do with Malcolm Gordon being a knockout artist and more to do with the fact that Jimmy Flick is just kind of he's got a glass chin, and all respect to him. But Jimmy Flick at minus 115, considering his track record of getting finished, I don't like that at all. That is a total pass for me. So I'm going to, by default, I'm going to take Malcolm Gordon, and I'm going to bank that he's going to figure out a way to get a finish in this fight. Okay, guys, the next fight we're going to talk about will happen in the women's strawweight division when Jillian Robertson goes up against Polyana Viana. Robertson enters the fight as the minus 190 betting favorite, Viana the plus 160 dog. You could expect the crowd to really get behind Robertson for this fight, as she is from Ontario. She currently trains out of Miami, Florida with Goat Shed MMA. Her head coach is Asim Zayati. He's a polarizing guy. You either love him or you hate him. But one thing I will say about that coaching team with Goat Shed MMA is you could expect all their fighters to be prepared and ready to go come fight night. The opponent here is Polyana Viana. It's really an interesting matchup because Viana, no doubt, brings certain skills to the table for this fight. She has a BJJ and a Muay Thai background. So when these two meet in the cage, I would expect Polyana Viana to have a significant striking advantage over Jillian Robertson. The other thing about her is her BJJ threats. You can expect her to really spam submission attempts. Polyana Viana has 2.46 submission attempts per 15 minutes. That is the highest according to UFC stats for the strawweight division. So that might be something to keep an eye on in this fight. A lot of people would look at this and say, okay, well, with Viana having the supposed striking advantage and with her BJJ background, why is she the plus 160 underdog? And really the answer for that is her takedown defense. It's really non-existent. And there were a few red flags in that Tabitha Ricci fight. Tabitha Ricci was 4 for 8 for takedowns in that fight. And Polyana Viana, she really was spamming guillotine chokes a lot during that fight, and it caused her to lose position and have to fight for prolonged amounts of time off her back. And in a 3-round fight, I'm not quite sure that is the wisest course of action, especially going up against somebody like Jillian Robertson. Jillian Robertson, if she has top control on you, it's not a real good place to be. And I would not expect Jillian Robertson to be deterred whatsoever by Polyana Viana's BJJ background as well. I am expecting her to more or less continue down her same style of fighting. I'm expecting her to want to grapple and want to bring this fight to the ground, despite whatever threats Polyana Viana might bring with the BJJ. Because Viana's poor takedown defense, that is why the odds makers have this fight with Robertson being favored to the extent that she is. And I think the odds makers are right for this one. I do think that Polyana Viana, sometimes I think her fight IQ gives her some problems in fights. It's a 3-round fight. And if she's expecting to do a lot of fighting off her back, and if she's going to spam submissions, I have a hard time seeing Jillian Robertson getting caught in one. I'm expecting Jillian Robertson to maintain most of the top control in this fight. I'm expecting most of this bout to occur on the ground and Jillian Robertson to get the better of the exchanges in the grappling for the duration of the 15-minute fight. And that's how I see it happening. Jillian Robertson by decision. I think that's the right pick for this one, so that's who we're going to go with. Okay, guys, moving on up the card, we are now in the welterweight division where Johan Lianesse goes up against England's Sam Patterson. Make sure you check the odds. They no doubt will have changed by the time this recording is up and available to view. But currently, Johan Lianesse is the minus 125 betting favorite. Sam Patterson, the plus 110 underdog. We'll start with Johan Lianesse. He is the former CFFC welterweight champion. His tenure in the UFC, though, really has not gone, I think, according to plan. I think that's certainly a fair statement. After winning on Dana White's Contender Series, frankly, the results just haven't been there. He's gotten knocked out by Gabriel Green, and Mike Mallott also ended up tapping him as well. His only successful bout happened in September 2022 over Darian Weeks, who's no longer in the promotion. Lianesse is favored because Sam Patterson got violently knocked out in his most recent fight. However, it's important to note that when Patterson did get knocked out, that fight happened in the UFC lightweight division. Now he moves up a weight class to 170 pounds. That's a first for Sam Patterson, but I understand why. I am not concerned whatsoever about Patterson moving up because he's huge. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's certainly big enough to compete in the UFC welterweight division. And I think it's a prudent move. That was a concern a lot of people had about Patterson in the past is this guy maybe a little chinny? He keeps his head kind of straight up, and that could certainly be a problem at the higher levels of the UFC welterweight division. But for now, fighting somebody like Johan Lianesse, who's kind of on the fringe of even being in the promotion, that's less of a concern to me. I think the move up to 170 pounds for Sam Patterson is going to pay dividends, and I also think that's going to help his chin quite a bit in this fight. The other thing about Sam Patterson that is notable to bring up is the submission threats that he brings to the table. He has had a lot of success ending fights, both by knockout as well as by submission as well. I also believe the level of competition certainly favors Sam Patterson. He's been competing throughout the Middle East against some of the top prospects from that part of the world for many years before he made his debut on the UFC Contender Series and then won that fight as well. So I think Patterson's resume is more impressive to me. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. The key is, can he get out of the first round? Because Johan Lianesse is going to want to brawl, and he's going to want to go for that knockout finish. That is his best path to victory. But if Sam Patterson can weather the storm, I think that he has the ability to catch Johan Lianesse making a mistake in this fight. And that's exactly how I see this one happening. I think Johan Lianesse is either going to fatigue or get countered trying to go for a finish. And I think Patterson's going to take advantage of that. So I have Sam Patterson winning this fight by submission. We have a rematch in our next fight when Sidey goes up against Ramon Taveras. These two met each other on week 5 of Dana White's Contender Series last year, and there was a bit of controversy in that fight. Referee Kevin McDonald gets criticized by Dana White for stopping the fight too early. Dana White calls it one of the worst stoppages he's ever seen. Sidey gets the contract on that night, officially getting a TKO win. Taveras gets invited back on Dana White Contender Series. He competes a month later. He gets a spectacular knockout. He gets a call up to the UFC. So you have both of these guys with prior history with one another. They're going to be rematching each other not so long after their initial encounter. And I think that makes for a really exciting fight. In the buildup up to this fight, Ramon Taveras had said something along the lines of, Sidey better put on his wrestling shoes. He better not strike with me because I'll be ready for him. And I thought that was kind of funny that he would say that. But there's a reason why he's saying that. Taveras did have quite a bit of success against Sidey in that initial meeting. He was getting the better of the striking exchanges, and that was certainly notable. However, he made a mistake. Sidey ends up countering him. He sits Taveras down on the canvas, and he ends up winning the fight. That initial encounter aside, I do think Sidey's the right guy, though. Ramon Taveras, as impressive as he was in that initial encounter, his resume, I have a lot of question marks about some of his prior competition. In fact, I did a dig on every single guy that he fought as a pro, and there's only one guy that's out of the red right now record-wise. So I'm not calling Ramon Taveras a can crusher, but I will say he did not fight the best competition prior to getting that opportunity on Dana White's Contender Series. He looked very impressive in his last fight, but I do think that there are levels to this game. And Sidey's resume compared to Taveras' resume, there is no competition. There's no comparison between the two. Sidey has the proven track record. He has fought the more established fighters, and I think he's going to be more prepared this next go-around. I think he knows exactly what to expect from Ramon Taveras. This will be a second fight camp of preparation, and I think sharing some time in the cage with him is only going to benefit him even more. I'm going to take Sidey. I think he's the right pick for this one, and I think he's going to get it done again by knockout. May not happen until later on in the fight, but I do think he's the right pick. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. I do think we're going to see him finish Ramon Taveras in the rematch. Okay, guys, we move on up into the featherweight division in a fight that I have circled that I'm really intrigued by. Charles Jourdain going up against Sean Woodson. How could you not get hyped up for this one? Jourdain 15-6 going up against the American who's 10-1. Sean Woodson, past couple years, he really hasn't been in the cage as often as you'd like him to be. He has a split draw against Luis Saldana going back to 2022, and in 2023 he competes one time against Dennis Buzukja, a fight that he ended up winning pretty decisively. But we have a big jump up in competition when he goes up against Charles Jourdain. Jourdain, in 2023, he did take care of some runs of the litter in the featherweight division. Kron Gracie, Ricardo Ramos, neither of which I really rate too highly. So both of these guys are taking a huge leap up in competition from some of their most recent names when they face each other in the cage. So it's going to make for a really exciting fight. As far as what you could expect in this one, Charles Jourdain, I'm not expecting him to grapple too much in this one or really to try to take the fight there whatsoever. His takedown success rate isn't really all that great. But more importantly, Sean Woodson, he has some of the best takedown defense in the featherweight division. Don't expect Charles Jourdain to shoot on a takedown. Don't expect him to level change against Sean Woodson. That's a quick way to run out the gas tank. I'm not really expecting that. I expect this bout to be primarily conducted on the feet. Charles Jourdain being the shorter guy, you could expect him to try to be the aggressor. Sean Woodson, I think he is going to use his 78-inch reach and really try to keep Jourdain at bay. And when you consider what's going to happen over an entire 15-minute fight, if we're taking grappling out of the equation, and I'm not expecting that to be a huge factor in this, Charles Jourdain may have a really tough time trying to cut that distance. He may have a tough time getting on the inside and figuring out a way to hurt Sean Woodson. And can he do that? It's certainly possible. He has that sort of like video game X factor about him. He could do an amazing wheel kick. He could land an amazing flying knee. They call him Air Jourdain for a reason. I just don't know if he's going to be able to achieve that against somebody of Sean Woodson's caliber. Sean Woodson, he's 10-1, and I've seen him weather some storms before. I go back to that fight when he fought Terrence McKinney on Dana White Contender Series back in 2019, I think it was. And Sean Woodson, he got clipped, he got hurt, but he ended up rallying and he ended up winning that fight against Terrence McKinney. And I'm expecting something similar to that to play out. I would expect Woodson to maybe get hurt once or twice throughout the duration of this fight, but I am expecting him to gather his bearings and to survive. I am expecting him to outpoint Charles Jourdain. I think that's what's going to happen for this particular fight. I think over the duration of an entire 15-minute fight, Sean Woodson is going to score more points. I think he's going to land more significant strikes against Charles Jourdain. And I think Sean Woodson is the guy that's going to come out on top in what is probably going to be a very highly contested fight. It would not surprise me if there is a split decision on this one. I rate these guys pretty closely to one another, but we're going to go with Sean Woodson by decision, and we're going to take the upset. Okay, guys, we are moving on up the card where Sean Strickland's teammate Chris Curtis will be going up against Marc-Andre Barrio in a middleweight clash. Chris Curtis's 13th ranking in the middleweight division will be on the line, and he'll be working to defend that number when he goes up against the power bar. I can't help but zero in on Chris Curtis's 40 professional fights, and the most impressive thing about Chris Curtis's resume is in 40 fights, he has only been finished twice. He lost a fight by knockout, and he lost one time by submission. So Chris Curtis's durability is something that I don't think is discussed enough, and it's something to really think about in terms of like how this fight is going to really shake out. For this fight, I'm also not expecting grappling to have a very big factor in this fight. Chris Curtis has the best takedown defense in the entire middleweight division, a 92% success rate. I'm not expecting the power bar with his 25% takedown accuracy to really make this into a grappling fight. I'm expecting this to be a brawl. And like Chris Curtis, Marc-Andre Barrio has been pretty durable. He has gotten choked out a few times, but the only time he's ever been knocked out is against Shidi Nakajuwani. That happened back in February of 2022. The rest of the time the power bar loses, it's by decision. It's going to remain to be seen how this one ends up going down. But when I think about the totality of the circumstances, when I think about what is the most likely outcome in this one, I have to go with the action man. I have to go with Chris Curtis. I do think that that's the right pick for this one. And I will say the power bar's durability, just like Chris Curtis's durability, that's his factor in this one. I don't think Chris Curtis is going to knock out Marc-Andre Barrio, and I don't expect Marc-Andre Barrio to knock out Chris Curtis either in this fight. I think whoever wins is going to have to go through a 15-minute dogfight to get that win, but I do think Chris Curtis is going to be the one that ends up getting it. We're going to go with Chris Curtis by decision. Chris Curtis, the -160 favorite. Marc-Andre Barrio, the +140 dog. But truly, I think it's probably closer to a -115, -115. I think ultimately it's going to be a very close fight, but I do think Chris Curtis is the right pick, and that's who we're going to go with in this fight. We're going to go with the action man to get it done and what should be a really exciting, fan-friendly fight. Chris Curtis by decision is the pick. Okay, guys, we are moving on up the card. We're in the bantamweight division when Brad Katona goes up against Garrett Armfield. Brad Katona 13-2, Armfield 9-3. Brad Katona will be re-entering the UFC for a second time. Of course, we all know he competed on Tough 31, and then he ended up fighting Cody Gibson in a classic in 2023 to punch his ticket into the UFC. His opponent's Garrett Armfield. Armfield's been in the UFC since 2022, but he's only competed twice. He stepped in for Austin Lingo to fill in against David Onama. He ends up getting choked out in the very second round. And really, ever since then, it's been a series of unfortunate events for him. He gets a fight against Christian Rodriguez. That doesn't end up materializing, and because of a staph infection on Armfield's part. And then for Jose Johnson, that fight doesn't end up going through because there's an issue with Jose Johnson and not being able to get medically cleared for the fight. He doesn't fight again until August of 2023 in Singapore, and he beats Toshiomi Kazama, knocking him out in the very first round. And he was spectacular in that fight. The one thing about Garrett Armfield is his striking and his power. It stands out, and for a short dude, he has a 70-inch reach, and I think that's very significant for the bantamweight division. The one thing you need to know about Garrett Armfield, Taekwondo black belt, you can expect a lot of kicks, you could expect a lot of punches, you could expect a lot of pressure. He's really exciting, and he's only 27 years old. I'm really curious to see just kind of like where his career ends up going. I think he's a bit of an X factor. I haven't seen him compete against the highest level of competition, and Brad Katona is by far the most difficult guy that Garrett Armfield will be encountering in his entire career. Fighting somebody like Jose Johnson, that's one thing, but going up against somebody like Brad Katona, a guy who fought for years in the Middle East and had a lot of success in the Middle East against some of the top contenders over there, I think that says something. When I think about this matchup, I think about a fight that's probably going to primarily happen on the feet. Brad Katona fought Cody Gibson for an entire 15 minutes, and I didn't see him shoot a takedown one time in that entire fight. He was happy to trade with Cody Gibson, and he was getting the better of those exchanges, particularly as that bout ended up going into the second round and into the third round as well. I'm not expecting Brad Katona to be all that intimidated by Garrett Armfield's striking. I think he'll sit back and happily trade with him. The one thing about Brad Katona is sometimes he can lull people to sleep. And I know he is not known for having a bunch of knockout power, but it would not surprise me if a young Garrett Armfield got some initial success and then swung for the fences and ends up getting countering and caught. That would not surprise me at all. When I think about these two and when I think about where they are in their careers, I have to go with Brad Katona. He's in his early 30s. He's in his athletic prime. Garrett Armfield, a really young guy. I still think he's kind of green. And this is a really difficult fight to throw him in this early on in his career. Is he going to finish Garrett Armfield? I'm not quite sure, unless it's a scenario in which I just talked about, unless Garrett makes a terrible mistake or he overcommits or gets too aggressive and gets countered. He could definitely lose that way. But I'm going to go with Brad Katona by decision. I do think that's the right pick for this one, but I'm not quite sure to what extent these two will grapple. I think it's mostly going to be on the feet, a striking fight, but I do think it's a fight that Brad Katona is going to cruise to. I would expect him to win this bout by 2 rounds. He might end up winning all 3 rounds. It's certainly a possibility, but Brad Katona by decision is who I have for this one. Okay, guys, we are moving on up the card. This time we are in the welterweight division where Neil Magny will be going up against Canada's Mike Mallott. Mallott, the minus 250 favorite, going up against Neil Magny, who comes into this fight at plus 205. Few interesting things about Mallott. He's currently on a 6-fight winning streak, and the last time he lost a fight was almost a decade ago, and that happened back in 2014 when World Series of Fighting was still a thing. He's only fought 6 times since then, but he has been absolutely perfect in all 6 of those bouts. Another interesting note about Mike Mallott is all 10 of his professional victories have all come by stoppage. And when you think about that stat, it's even more impressive considering he has been in the UFC for the length of time that he has been. Going back to 2021, when you look at Mike Mallott, he has fought, I'm pulling it up right now. After the Contender Series win on 2021, he fights Mickey Gall. He ends that round. He ends that fight by finish. He fights Johan Lianesse, arm triangle choke finish, and then Adam Fugit, guillotine choke finish. So you're talking about 3 fights since he's been in the UFC, and he's managed to finish every single one of them. Mallott goes up against Neil Magny. Neil Magny's 36 years old, and when I did homework on this one, and when I looked at Neil Magny's body of work, he seems like a guy that's been around forever, and it's because he has been around forever. Neil Magny's been in the UFC since Carlos Condit was the champion, has put up a record, a 28-12 record, and has had that sort of longevity in the world's elite MMA promotion. That's something to be said about. Neil Magny, you're talking about a guy who's never really been like a serious contender in the UFC, but also like his longevity is to be commended. And he's had a ton of success. With that being said, he is at the age of 36 years old, and at this point in his career holding a lower ranking in that division at a number 13 spot. He's not going to go on a contender run anytime soon. Really, he's a gatekeeper at this point, and you can see that more as evidenced by his most recent fight against Ian Gary. They knew what they were doing on that fight. The idea was for Gary to get a win over a guy like Neil Magny to push him up the rankings, and they're doing that again with Mike Mallott. And unfortunately, that's just kind of a harsh reality of being a 36-year-old and being ranked at the tail end of that welterweight class. These are the type of fights that you're going to get. And a lot of people don't like that, but that's just kind of the reality of it. Neil Magny's last fight was concerning to me. When you look at the tape from Ian Gary, Gary had a ton of success getting those low kicks on Neil Magny. And the really only disappointing thing for me was, how did that fight end up going the full 15 minutes? How did Ian Gary not get a finish? Neil Magny, I didn't see him check one kick over that 15-minute duration, and I felt that he was really on the ropes, and I felt that Ian Gary really screwed the pooch, and I think that he could have ended up getting a finish had he game planned a little bit better. But, that's a missed opportunity for him. When you're Mike Mallott and you're looking at that film, I do wonder, okay, to what extent do low kicks figure into your game? When Magny is unable to check any of those kicks, does that a factor into your game plan whatsoever. When I look at Mike Mallott, there are a few things that he does that really stand out to me. Number one is he switches from southpaw to orthodox often. So you'll see him switch stances often, and he's very unpredictable in what it is that he does. Mike Mallott, he has amazing kicks, and he's had a lot of success with roundhouse kicks to the body. He does an excellent job of working the torso and inflicting damage to the body, and I like that a lot about Mike Mallott. And then as soon as you start getting worried about the body and start covering your body, he'll grapple with you, and then he'll take the fight to the ground. And Mike Mallott, I think he does an excellent job of, he hurts you first, and then he goes for the submission every single time. That unpredictability about Mike Mallott really stands out to me. And when you look at his resume, he only has 4 wins by knockout and then 6 wins by submission. So that goes to show you that this guy is programmed to find the finish, and he does an excellent job of doing so. He has never been to a decision at any point in his entire career, and I'm not expecting that at this one either. I'm not expecting that to happen for this fight either. I am expecting Mike Mallott to hurt Neil Magny and to go for a finish. It wouldn't completely surprise me if he ends up finding this finish by knockout, but we'll go with Mallott by submission. I do think that that's a little bit more akin to his track record. That's typically what he likes to do. He could hurt Neil Magny with a kick to the liver and then go for like a guillotine, or go for a takedown and then get like a arm triangle or something like that. That's certainly a possibility, but I'm looking for Mike Mallott to get this done by submission and advance in the welterweight rankings. We move on up the card when number 3 ranked Arnold Allen will be going up against Movsar Evloev, who's the number 9th ranked UFC featherweight contender, in a really exciting matchup. Arnold Allen 19-2, Evloev a perfect 17-0. Evloev was the one that asked for this fight. He fought Diego Lopez in his most recent bout, and then he went on social media and asked for Ilia Topuria or Arnold Allen, and he ends up getting his wish in a fight against Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen, this wasn't a guy that he was really looking to fight per se, but the idea of going up against somebody with a perfect record, that appealed to him. And he told MMA Junkie that he doesn't have a ton of name recognition, but if he can be the guy to give Evloev his very first loss, that puts him in a really good position to potentially get a better fight further on down the road. So that's the appeal for Allen. That's how he's justifying taking this fight in his mind. Allen, the southpaw fighter, going up against Evloev. Evloev has a slight 2-inch reach advantage, and really this fight's going to come down to Arnold Allen's takedown defense. If he can stuff Movsar Evloev, I think he has a high chance of winning this fight. For Arnold Allen, I think it's a pretty straightforward strategy. Sprawl and brawl. That's what it is that you need to do. And if he can do that, he really could lay a hurting on Evloev. A really good example of how highly respected Arnold Allen is if you go back and you watch that fight against Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar, one of the best boxers in MMA, and you saw him give Arnold Allen a ton of respect. And you saw him take steps back and really respect Arnold Allen's power. And I thought that was telling. And it's unfortunate that fight ended the way that it did. It's very unfortunate that Kattar hurt his knee, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. But make no mistake about it, Arnold Allen was getting the better of those striking exchanges. And the idea of him going toe-to-toe with somebody with that striking threat that Calvin Kattar possesses, that's going to give him even more confidence going up against Evloev. Yes, he ended up getting his ass beat against Max Holloway, but I am expecting Arnold Allen to make the proper adjustments for this fight. The other thing that I really look at is Arnold Allen's takedown defense. That has to be talked about. He has a 76.6% takedown defense rate. And Evloev, you have to figure that factors into a big part of his game plan. He does not want to stand and strike, with Arnold Allen. That is a recipe for disaster. The key for Evloev is finding a level change and getting this fight down to the ground. But good luck doing that against Arnold Allen. If he can sprawl and brawl like how I think he can, I think Arnold Allen's the right pick for this one. And I'm going to go with Arnold Allen by knockout. Okay, guys, we are moving on. Now we are at the co-main event where the vacant women's bantamweight title is on the line. Raquel Pennington will be going up against Mayra Bueno Silva. My last look at the odds, MBS is coming in as a minus 160 favorite. The comeback on Raquel Pennington plus 130. The state of the bantamweight division is really kind of questionable. It's very interesting. This might be the very first time I remember a title fight between two contenders. One comes into this fight coming off of a no contest, and then the other one is coming into this fight having not fought in a year. I think that's an indicator of where this weight class is. And I'm just really hoping that Juliana Pena comes back into this fold and can maybe breathe some air into this women's bantamweight clash. This is a fight that I don't think a lot of people are really too excited about. Raquel Pennington, she's not really going to say a whole lot. And Mayra Bueno Silva, she's really the one that has really been doing all the talking about this fight. She's questioned Raquel Pennington's heart. She's called her a quitter. She has basically said that she's going to go on and she's going to hurt Raquel Pennington, and she predicts a second-round knockout finish. That'll remain to be seen. The one thing about Raquel Pennington that she does really well is she operates well in the clinch, and she will dirty box with you until the day is long. Raquel Pennington is very, very strong, and she does a good job with her pressure as well. The one concern I kind of have going into this contest is with Mayra Bueno Silva. When we saw her fight Holly Holm, we saw Holly Holm have some success in that clinch position as well. Holly Holm certainly won the first round between those two, but she ends up making a mistake and gets herself caught in a ninja choke by Bueno Silva. Will that happen in this fight? And that's ultimately where I have some questions. For Raquel Pennington, I don't expect really a whole. I'm really expecting the same Raquel Pennington that I think we've all seen. She's really not the most exciting fighter, but she wins. And right now, she's on the most successful stretch of her career. She's currently on a 5-fight winning streak. And that's been very impressive, particularly in her mid-30s. She's still finding a ton of success. Mayra Bueno Silva, she's only 32. She's in her athletic prime, or at least she should be statistically. But it's going to remain to be seen, how is she going to handle Raquel's Pennington's clinch? Pennington, that's exactly what it is that she wants to do. She's going to want to clinch. She's going to want to make this a dirty boxing fight, and she'll do it for 25 minutes, no problem. But where Bueno Silva really will have the advantages with just the raw striking. I think she's the more explosive fighter. I think she's the more powerful fighter. But I also think that she has some tricks up her sleeve. When Holly Holm went to spam on the clinch, she ended up losing the fight that way. Bueno Silva put her in a ninja choke and ended up making her pay for that, and she ends up winning the fight. When I think of all the intangibles, and when I think about what both these women bring to the table, I'm inclined to go with Mayra Bueno Silva. I think that's the right pick for this one. Would it surprise me if Raquel Pennington ended up winning? No, it wouldn't. But I'm going to bank on Mayra Bueno Silva to get this one done, and I'm expecting her to get a finish in this one as well. I'm 50-50. I don't really know how she's going to do it, but if I had to guess, I'm going to go with Mayra Bueno Silva by knockout or TKO. I think that over the course of a 25-minute fight, she may lose a round or two. It's certainly a possibility, but she has that raw power and that athleticism where I feel like she could really seriously hurt Raquel Pennington at some point in this fight. And that's what I'm banking happening at some point over this 25-minute duration. I'm expecting Silva to find a way to get a finish, and it's most likely going to be done with the striking. We'll see if I'm right, but Mayra Bueno Silva is the pick for this one. Okay, guys, we are moving on to the main event. Sean Strickland will be defending his title against Dricus Du Plessis. Sean Strickland, the -130 favorite, going up against Du Plessis, the +110 underdog. It's a really interesting fight for me. The first question mark I have is, what's Sean Strickland's headspace going into this fight? Does any of the trash talk leading up to this bout impact his performance at all? That'll remain to be seen. Your guess is as good as mine. For Sean Strickland, I think it's pretty straightforward. We all know what Sean Strickland likes to do: pressure fight, throw 1-2s, and he can do that for 25 minutes, no problem. We've seen it time and time again. He has excellent cardio. The one thing about Sean Strickland that I don't think people talk about enough is his defense. He's very elusive and he's very difficult to hit. That was definitely one of the things that leapt out at me when I was studying his tape. He will use a Philly shell, which is really unique for MMA. We don't really see that all too often. And a lot of fighters have a really difficult time trying to handle his pressure and trying to inflict damage on Sean Strickland. He's very elusive, and he's just nonstop. And some people will say, like, well, is he going to pressure somebody like Dricus Du Plessis? And I think the answer is yes. I'm not really expecting a whole lot of wholesale changes from Sean Strickland. When you go back and you look at that Alex Pereira fight, he was pressuring Alex Pereira most of the fight as well. Sean Strickland is a guy that's going to be the one that takes that first step forward, and I'm expecting more of the same against Dricus Du Plessis. For Du Plessis, he also brings some intangibles into this fight. He is not the cleaner striker between the two. Let's not get it twisted. But Dricus Du Plessis, he wins ugly, and he wins by just brute force. Is that going to be enough against somebody like Sean Strickland? That remains to be seen. I think for Dricus Du Plessis, in order for him to win, he's going to have to emulate what Alex Pereira did. And there are two things that Alex did in that fight that caused him to win. Number one, he was able to employ low kicks and had a very high success rate in doing so. Sean Strickland was marching forward, and then Alex was making him pay a toll for that. And you'll notice in that first round of that fight, he was able to inflict some leg damage on Sean Strickland. He was able to use that low kick pretty effectively. The other thing Alex did really well against Sean Strickland, he was able to target his body really well. He was able to throw jabs at Sean Strickland's torso and get Sean Strickland to lower his hand. And you'll notice Sean Strickland was in a Philly shell, and when he lowered his hand, that's where Alex Pereira gets him with that left hook and ends the fight. I think for Dricus Du Plessis, he's going to need to get Sean Strickland to make a mistake like that. If Sean Strickland can make a mistake like that, Dricus Du Plessis most certainly has the knockout power, just like Alex does, to win this fight. If you like Dricus Du Plessis, I think you have to go for that knockout. I think you have to take the under. But when I look at this, and if I have to make a prediction, I'm going to predict that Sean Strickland is learned from that, and he studied that. He knows where he made that mistake, and I'm expecting him to fight patient, and I'm expecting him to apply that pressure and to tire Du Plessis over the duration of a 25-minute fight. We know Sean Strickland can last 25 minutes, and we know that he's going to continue to press. And Dricus Du Plessis might be able to do that for the first couple of rounds. But when we get into rounds 3, 4, and 5, is he going to be able to do that? That remains to be seen, and we haven't seen him compete in a 25-minute fight. There's a lot of chatter about, oh, well, his nose is fixed. Joe Rogan mentioned that during the Whitaker fight, that he had surgery and now his nose is fixed. But that remains to be seen. Could that have a positive impact on his cardio? I'm sure it does, but nonetheless, you're still talking about a 25-minute fight, and that's a question mark for me. I still have question marks about Dricus's cardio. I really do, and I don't have that concern with Strickland as well. When I take into account the totality of all of these factors, and if I have to make a guess on what's going to end up happening, I have to go with Sean Strickland by decision. I think that's the most logical and most likely outcome for this fight. I just don't see Dricus Du Plessis finding a way to get the knockout. I don't. It's possible. It's certainly possible, but I'm banking on Sean Strickland to have learned from the Alex Pereira fight, and I'm going to expect him to be patient and to tax Dricus Du Plessis' cardio. And when he does, he's really going to start turning up the volume. It wouldn't surprise me if Sean Strickland started this fight off maybe 1 or 2 rounds in the hole. It wouldn't surprise me if Du Plessis is able to hurt Strickland early on in this fight. But look for Strickland to turn up the volume, turn up the heat on Du Plessis, and look for him to get the decision. So we'll see if I'm right or not. Okay, guys, that does it for my UFC 297 picks. There was a shit ton of research that went into these, and I hope if you guys are betting alongside my picks that you do really well. If you guys would like this video, if you guys would share it with your network, I'd really appreciate it. And even better, if you would roll with me for the rest of this year. I'll keep doing more of these videos. All I ask is that you subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and show me some support, because there's a lot of hours, there's a lot of research that goes into it, and I'm just appreciative for anyone that shows me love for my work. But that'll do it for me. Enjoy UFC 297, guys, and I'll catch you later.